You have owners. They own you. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets, and they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Welcome back to part 2 of Know Your Owners, George Soros. In part 1, we covered George Soros' past, his investments, and connection to certain elite families. In part 2, we are covering Soros' investment into certain activist groups. I have already laid out in my series Foreign Money the connection of Soros to the Tar Sands campaign and Lead Now, so I will not be covering those inside this series. If you would like to know more on these subjects, links are in the description. One of the main strategies used by Soros is to spread division and fear through the use of activist groups. The two main ones he has financed is Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Soros does not start these groups, but leeches on them and funds their activity, especially if they are violent. We can look to a group such as Black Lives Matter. BLM was started as a hashtag online in 2013 after George Zimmerman was found not guilty in the murder of Trayvon Martin. It really took off in Ferguson during the shooting of Michael Brown and the death of Eric Gardner in New York, who died as a result of a chokehold while being arrested for selling loose cigarettes on the street. The death of Michael Brown in 2014 led to large protests and riots in Ferguson that destroyed a lot of the local businesses and infrastructure. Since then, an interesting phenomenon has happened known as the Ferguson effect. This is also due to similar reactions taking place across the country of white cops shooting black suspects. The Ferguson effect is when the police stop doing their jobs in fear of being called racist and receiving social backlash. This involves them refusing to stop suspects, responding to calls, and engaging suspects when necessary. This leads to a large influx in crime, from murders to violent assaults to rapes. If we look at the crime rate in Ferguson over the years, from 2002 to 2014, Ferguson averaged 7.82 murders, 236.6 assaults, and 220.8 robberies per 100,000 people. From 2015 and 2016, they averaged 33.25 murders, 430 assaults, and 712.7 robberies per 100,000 people. This similar effect has been seen in other cities across America, including New Orleans, St. Louis, Washington, and Baltimore. However, it has not been consistent in every major city. Cities such as New York have had a pretty steady decrease in crime over the years. Black Lives Matter has been active in just about every high-profile killing by a white cop against a black man or woman, whether it has merit or not. One of the biggest criticisms of the group is that they are silent on the black-on-black crime rate and the massive amount of killings that have happened in the black community. This group is what we call useful idiots. They have done a good job at furthering the racial divide in America, which is something many Americans already feel has deteriorated over the years. It is all part of the plan to destabilize America. Unfortunately, the closer they come to a civil war, the more this plan is coming to fruition. George Soros has funded Black Lives Matter in the Ferguson protest. Not even Snopes, the so-called fact-checkers, could deny this fact. It has been reported that Soros paid $33 million to already established grassroots groups that worked with the protesters and went on to form Black Lives Matter, paid through the Open Society Foundation. This funding was used to bus in protesters from Washington, D.C. and New York to Ferguson to protest and to keep the numbers of protesters constant over the course of a few weeks in the city. One of these groups was the Organization for Black Struggle from St. Louis, Missouri. The group began back in the 1980s, made up of civil rights activists, students, and union members. The Organizations for Black Struggle went on to create the Hands Up Coalition, who was also active in Ferguson. It was this group that popularized the Hands Up, Don't Shoot slogan that was used throughout the protests. The slogan was highly influential to manipulate media outlets and onlookers to the protesters' side. The Drug Policy Alliance also received funding from Soros. They worked on public relations for the movement, popularizing the term Black Lives Matter on social media and the news so that it became a well-known phrase that politicians were using in their speeches, such as Hillary Clinton. Many other groups and organizations have joined Soros in funding the Black Lives Matter. We know that the Ford Foundation has pledged support for the group. The Ford Foundation, along with Borealis Philanthropy, created the Black-led Movement Fund to raise $100 million over 6 years to BLM and other black movements through the Democracy Alliance, which is a network of progressive donors who coordinate their donations to specific groups. One of these men is Tom Steyer, one of the Democratic Party's largest donors and a contributor to the anti-Albertan tar sands campaign. The Center for American Progress has also donated grant money to Black Lives Matter. The Center for American Progress was started by John Podesta, the former chief of staff of the Bill Clinton administration and acted as counselor to President Barack Obama. The CAP has worked closely with the Democratic Party. Google has also donated $2.35 million to Black Lives Matter and other black groups doing activist work. One of the main problems with Black Lives Matter is the violence that comes with the group. During the Ferguson protest, 25 buildings were burned and a number of others received property damage, including broken windows. 10 people were injured, that included 6 police officers who were injured during the protest. The protests cost the city $5.7 million in repair. A number of assaults took place during this time. In 2015, Baltimore was hit with its own riot over the death of Freddie Gray, who was injured and later died in a police transport vehicle. He was not secured properly and as a result broke his neck. A large protest broke out led by Black Lives Matter, and once again large-scale violence and damage was seen. 20 cops were injured, over 300 businesses were damaged, 150 vehicles were set ablaze, there was 60 structural fires to houses and businesses as well as 27 drugstores that were looted. A state of emergency was enforced and the National Guard was brought in. The end result was around $13 million in property damage. The city was eventually sued by dozens of business owners for the cost of the damage. Black Lives Matter has shown to have large groups of racists involved in the movement. These are people who accuse all white people of being the problem in society. They use racial slurs and stereotypes very much in the way they accuse others of treating them. One such person is Yusra Kogali, who also goes by the name Yusra Ali. She is the founder of Black Lives Matter Toronto. In 2016, she put out a tweet where she said, "Please Allah, give me the strength not to cuss/kill these men and white folks out here today." This is not the only time she has said things such as this. In early 2017, Yusra made a post on Facebook that she later deleted in which she said whiteness is not human, it is subhuman, that white people are genetic defects and deficient. This does not represent all members of the group, but there is a large enough number to make an impact and for the people to take notice. When you have founders of the group speaking in this way, it is a reflection on the entire group. Several of their members have let their prejudice turn to violence. This is not something that mainstream media will report on a lot of the time, but there has been several documented cases of BLM activists committing vicious attacks on white people simply because they are white. There was a case in the city of Akron, Ohio back in 2016. In this situation, 7 men, 5 black and 2 white, approached a group of 7 white men and chanted "Black Lives Matter." They then beat up the group with bottles. One man was knocked to the ground and was punched and kicked in the head until he was knocked unconscious. The group was then robbed. In the 2016 Milwaukee riots, a video streamed through Facebook Live that showed Black Lives Matter members in the streets, and they explicitly speak about attacking white people that come down their street.
They beating up every white person. They jumping every white person. Man, no white person come down Sherman. He white. Beat this shit, bitch. That's what it's for.
There are many more examples of BLM violence and prejudice, but I just wanted to show the types of people that George Soros funds. Soros is described as a philanthropist, which by definition means a person who seeks to promote the welfare of others, especially by the generous donations of money to a good cause. Does this seem like a group that promotes the welfare of others? People like Soros have used the term philanthropist as a cover. I have made the comparison before to Bruce Wayne and Batman. Bruce Wayne is described as a philanthropist, but he uses this as a cover for his alter ego Batman. He uses it so people won't suspect who he really is, and sometimes uses it to further his cause as Batman, whether that is for information or to acquire the gadgets and tools he needs to fight crime. The difference is these philanthropists are not fighting crime, they use it as a cover to achieve their personal goals and sometimes cover their criminal activity. Another group that was funded by Soros is the anti-fascist group, also known as Antifa. Antifa is a collection of loosely affiliated left-wing groups that claim they are fighting against encroaching fascism in the United States and other countries. Many in the corporate media have called this a conspiracy theory, but there is enough evidence to prove that this is not the case. Probably the best piece of evidence I can present is this video of Antifa protesting George Soros, demanding that they pay them. He is also shown to give some of these groups money through a proxy group. He gave $100,000 to the group called Alliance for Global Justice. Alliance for Global Justice then turned around and gave $50,000 to Refuse Fascism, one of these Antifa-affiliated groups. Refuse Fascism was created just weeks after President Trump was elected. Refuse Fascism was involved in the First Battle of Berkeley on February 1st, 2017 in protest of Milo Yiannopoulos being invited as a speaker to the university. The battle caused $500,000 in damages to the school. There were 3 more major battles that took place at the school on March 4th and April 15th, 2017. There were several other skirmishes that took place in Berkeley, California, but the ones that got the most attention was the one that took place on April 15th. The second battle gave rise to the base stickman, and the third introduced us to Moldylocks, and this is most likely why the mainstream media took notice. Moldylocks was part of the Antifa group that was opposing the group the Oath Keepers. During that protest, Moldylocks was punched in the face. She received national attention with CBS San Francisco giving her a one-on-one interview. They portrayed her as a victim, but that is far from the truth. Before leaving to go to the protest, she put a post up on her Facebook where she said, "Headed to Berkeley to disrupt the neo-Nazi/white supremacist circle jerk today. Nervous as fuck, but determined to bring back 100 Nazi scalps." This shows her intent to commit acts of violence while she was there. Tim Pool was on the ground in Berkeley and spoke to her briefly. Here's what she said.
So during the fighting, there was about 7 M80s thrown into the crowd from the Antifa side. One of them landed next to an old woman who fell down trying to get away from it. I'm wondering if you or I know you don't speak for the entire group, but do you condemn the throwing of fireworks at people?
Well, the revolution isn't fucking easy. I mean, I got kneed in the face, pepper sprayed in the eye, and some guy tried hitting my head against a rock. And he was wearing a fucking Make America Great Again hat.
She had no regret for the old lady that was knocked over or the violence that was taking place by the Antifa side. People also witnessed her throwing bottles during the protest. After she was punched in the face, she gave an interview with CBS where she proceeded to lie the entire time. This video comes from the Thinkery. I have clipped it to the most relevant parts.
Turning around, and from the corner of my eye, I saw like this fist coming at me, and I didn't have any time to like understand and process what was going on. I just put my arms up to kind of push him away as much as I could, and he just totally threw himself into me. He punched me right on the bridge of my nose, which it kind of cut it a little bit, but it's already kind of healed. I got right back up. I was punched twice more by 2 other people. But they kept throwing me down, and the last thing that happened was someone came up, and it was crazy because I made eye contact with him as he was running up to me, and he grabbed me by like my shoulders like this, and he started kneeing my forehead a bunch of times.
This helps to prove that the media has either been covering up Antifa's violence or have even supported them in their cause. I will touch on this after I finish discussing Moldylocks. She is no victim in the Battle of Berkeley. She was an active player and is just as guilty as the guy who punched her. Moldylocks has engaged in porn under the name Venus Rosale. She was discovered by 4chan after she was made famous by the mainstream media for her involvement at Berkeley. I have censored out anything that goes against YouTube's terms of services, but believe me, I am doing you a favor as well. Let me just tell you this. She performed under the hairy category. The media has actively covered up Antifa's violence. This is if they are not fully supporting their actions. We see that when CBS was interviewing Moldylocks, they defended her and her position without question, even though the video evidence proved otherwise. CBC has also been guilty of this as well. During the Berkeley protest in August 2017, they reported on the events. In that video, they edited out the clips of Antifa so they only displayed the pictures of right-wing protesters getting arrested, leaving out any video of Antifa members committing acts of violence or getting arrested. A more recent example was in December during the 2018 rally against the Global Compact for Migration on Parliament Hill, which I attended. At the beginning of that rally, Antifa confronted the protesters. A brief skirmish happened and 9 people were arrested. All were members of Antifa. The CBC article did not specify that the violence was started by Antifa. The CBC article did not specify that the violence was started by Antifa and that they were the ones who got arrested. Don Lemon of CNN has repeatedly defended Antifa on his program. Here is just one circumstance as reported by NRA TV.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence. No one condones the violence, but there were different reasons for Antifa and for these neo-Nazis to be there. One, racist fascists. The other group fighting racist fascists. There's a distinction there.
Several US Democratic politicians have also defended Antifa, especially early into the Trump presidency. This includes current Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and Keith Ellison. These days they have had to walk back their previous statements, but they still supported the group even when their violent streak were well known. Antifa has crossed the line from battling in the streets to threats of assassination and arming themselves for deadly confrontations. At the beginning of January 2019, in Germany, the state chairman of the Alternative for Germany party, also known as the AfD party, Frank Magnitz, was attacked as he left a New Year's reception in Bremen by 3 masked men. He nearly had his skull cracked open. Magnitz's party described it as an assassination attempt. The masked men are a pretty clear giveaway that this was Antifa. That and an Antifa group took credit for the attack. I threw their public statement through the Google Translate, so it may not be perfect, but this is what it said. The anti-fascist Spring Bremen announces that we want to free the AfD politician Frank Magnitz on Monday against 6 p.m. local time of his fascist ideas. Magnitz, who keeps good contacts in the right-wing extremist and fascist scene and frequently appears with racist expressions, cannot take a foothold in Bremen and elsewhere, and here's like any other Nazi muzzled. We do not tolerate any Nazi scum in our area. The anti-fascist spring will come. Get ready. The Independent article goes on to say that the AfD party members claim that they had been increasingly targeted by left-wing Antifa in recent months. On January 30th, the Antifa website Indie Media published a set of instructions for its members. These instructions were for assassinating specific members of the AfD party. This is leading into the 2019 German election. The AfD currently is placed 3rd in the polls. These instructions have caused several politicians in Germany to demand that Antifa be classified as a terrorist group. Just a day before these instructions were released to the public, Antifa set fire to an AfD member's car. One person was captured and was linked back to the Amadeo Antonio Foundation. The Amadeo Antonio Foundation was founded by Anita Kahane, a former Stasi agent in Eastern Germany during the Cold War, and was contracted to censor Facebook in Germany. The Amadeo Antonio Foundation has also been financed by George Soros' Open Society Foundation. They have also received funding from the Ford Foundation. I have said before that wherever Soros is, the Ford Foundation is close by. On January 11, a high-ranking member of the Antifa group Red Army, Charles Landeros, was shot and killed by U.S. police officers inside his daughter's middle school.
You're under arrest. Let go. You are under arrest. Let go of me. You are under arrest. Let go of me. Go to recourse. Get out.
At the time, he was in the middle of a custody battle with his ex-wife and was resisting arrest when he pulled out his gun and fired 2 rounds at the police. They shot him in self-defense. Officer Steve Tim was cleared of any wrongdoing in the shooting. Steven Crowder of Louder with Crowder did an undercover expose on Antifa. He sent his co-host, Not Gay Jared, to infiltrate the group. What they came across was startling. When Jared first met with them, they installed an encrypted app for his phone in order to communicate. Upon another meeting, Jared was handed an ice pick as a weapon, and a third meeting was given a knife after they discussed the type of weapons they had and were looking for. They attempted to turn this footage over to the members of the media, including Matt McDonald from Fox 13 News and Dan Harris from ABC's Nightline, but both of them refused to take it and didn't report on it at all. We also have the massive riots that took place in Hamburg, Germany in 2017 during the G20 summit. This saw thousands of black-clad Antifa members take to the streets and attack the opposition and the police and cause massive amounts of damage to local businesses. In the end, about 12 million euros worth of damage was caused and more than 300 police officers were injured. Official numbers of civilian injuries is unknown, but estimates are believed to be high. These are the type of people that George Soros supports both ideologically and financially. What kind of philanthropist supports violent groups that commit acts of violence to such an extreme degree? He uses groups such as this to push for policy changes and silence the opposition. He is far from a philanthropist. He is a scumbag excuse for a human being. This concludes part 2 of Know Your Owners, George Soros. In part 3, we will look at the Open Society Foundation and their involvement in funding immigration all across the world. Stay tuned.